Welcome back to this Razor's Edge podcast. My name is Gareth Armstrong, and across the table from me is Alon Ray, CEO of Race Corp. In this series, we're talking 10 entrepreneurial archetypes because, as Alon has been working with entrepreneurs for over 20 years, he's come across a number of different kinds of excuses why entrepreneurs do what they do, why entrepreneurs make the decisions that they make, and also sometimes why entrepreneurs are successful and others aren't. Alon, in the last episode, we spoke the David, as in David versus Goliath. In this episode, we're talking struggling artist. Just kick us off. What is a struggling artist?
Well, maybe let me tell you a real story, because the archetypes were developed more than 20 years ago. About 10 years ago, I was invited to an artist's studio, and they were actually doing work for themselves. It was a husband and wife, or it was more like a boyfriend and girlfriend, I think, than a husband and wife. But they seemed to have been together for a long time, and she was very proud of him, taking us around, showing all his work. And then I noticed that there was other types of work being done there. So I asked the question, what is this work here? To which he answered that this is work he's doing for another famous artist, and it's in the replication of that famous artist's work. So he's doing replicas of this work. And let me just say that I don't want to mention names now, but this artist is globally famous, sells work all across the world, and has got a mixture between originals, limited prints, and then commercial product where it'll either be small statues or artifacts that he designed, and then it needs to be replicated in the same way to go into art shops across the world, or art related shops and art galleries around the world, where it's known not to be an original, but if somebody wants a small, they can buy this thing. And this whole discussion ensued about what they called me there for was that their business wasn't doing well. And they actually put on this lavish dinner, invited my wife and I and another couple to their studio. And it was all wonderful. And then we started talking about this other artist. And there was this deep tension in the air about that artist has sold his soul. He's not a real artist. And then a conversation happens. Why is he not an artist? Well, because he's commercialized. Because he's got me making all the replicas on his behalf. I said, well, do the originals go for a lot of money? Yes, they do. Sometimes millions of dollars. So he is an artist, but he's not an artist, they say, because he's doing all this commercial stuff as well. And that was, for me, that story is the epitome of the struggling artist, is that when I asked him why he wouldn't do the same, he said, no, that's not how artists operate. Real artists would never do that. It's a purist pursuit. So that might be true. I'm not here to argue the merits of art or being an artist. But what I'm here to talk about is the fact that mindset, there was this deep contradiction where this individual is inviting me to come talk about how to commercialize, how to become successful commercially. The answer is right in his face. And he refuses, not just doesn't see it, refuses to participate in the answer, because he would rather remain in a purist state and be the artist, and to be more accurate, a struggling artist, than to commercialize his work and not be a struggling artist.
Now, remember, as you're listening to this, it's very important to note that what we aren't doing in this conversation is trying to point a finger and say, this is bad, you're a terrible individual if you are inclined this way. What we are trying to do instead is assist you in getting back onto the road to success. Alon, I know you were sitting in this environment, and it was possibly quite easy to identify a struggling artist because he was standing right in front of you. An entrepreneur that will be listening to this, how would you guide them to identify whether they are that struggling artist?
So before I answer that, the term struggling artist doesn't refer to just struggling artists. It refers to a mindset, as we said, an archetype within entrepreneurs, where there is a purist view that is holding back a commercial view. Okay. And that's a choice. When that choice is, let's call it, understood, and it's accepted that there are consequences for that choice, and there's a holdout until there might or might not be a big payday. But when you have an individual who is, inverted commas, in a struggling artist context, where they are sincerely struggling to commercialize and to make money, and they don't see that they are holding themselves back, that is the problem we're trying to solve here. We're trying to shine a light on the inability for some entrepreneurs to see the contradiction of their stance and how their stance is actually causing the problem. And it's not, as I said earlier, just artists. It is people who are creative and create things. So it could be in an engineering firm. It could be in a advertising agency. It could be in a video production business. It generally is in the environment where people create new things and there is an attachment to that creation. So that's the general area of this. Doesn't mean that it can't be in other areas. So if you're an accounting firm and you've maybe created a new system, that's the creation of a new system. It's your relationship with what you've created is the issue. And if you refuse to think about it in a commercial way because you feel you're selling yourself out, that is where you would find the struggling artist. So here are a couple of pointers about the struggling artist. This is how you identify them. He or she values their art, in inverted commas, over their need for profit. There's this common feeling that no one ever gets them, like they're just so misunderstood. Everyone else is an idiot, and they will even say that, well, they're idiots. In my story, they didn't use the word idiot, but they certainly used the word sellout or whatever similar term that they used in this deep contradiction that I was observing. And that's what they would use, that other artists, in inverted commas, have sold out. Commercializing their work is not up for discussion. They won't even talk about it, but they will talk about the fact that they are struggling, but they won't talk about commercialization. And selling their work in a commercial way, they would think that they are a second-hand car salesman. You know, like if they had to commercialize, they would label themselves in a quite a negative state because they are selling their stuff, that people aren't in the purest world walking up to them and admiring the work that they've done and saying, how much for this? Okay. So the whole idea of them going out and saying, would you like to buy this, i.e. selling, is just not on the cards. And the final thing is that they tend to be commercially unsound. Yeah.
Just to return to the second last point there, the idea of someone coming up and admiring and appreciating, something that you advocate quite strongly for all entrepreneurs is to build a price list. So there are a number of artifacts that seem to reveal themselves with entrepreneurs that are moving in a bit more of a healthy way along the entrepreneurial journey. Can you highlight a few more of those? Because maybe some of us were thinking, oh, that's not me. If I don't have some of these artifacts, maybe it is in fact me.
So artifacts of successful entrepreneurs in comparison to struggling artists, where they would probably not have these artifacts, are priceless, as you mentioned before, that there would be a price list, a simple thing. And that price list would be market related, which leads us to the second artifact, which is they would have done, whether formally or informally, a competitor analysis. They would have tried to understand what the market was doing, competitors, where they were pricing, what were the trends. They would have done some level of competitor analysis so that they were in the market. They would then have tried to niche themselves and say, I'm different because, not because of me, I'm different because I represent this. And there would be a relationship between their difference and their pricing.
And their
Yeah.
competitors.
And the competitors. So they would be positioned. We're in this part of the market. So, yes, we're expensive, but this is why we're expensive. Not we're super expensive because it was me that was inspired at 2 o'clock in the morning and got up and created it. Those would be, I think, the high level ones that would be available, the high level artifacts, as you call it, that would be present. The other, let's call it artifacts, that would be quite apparent is that there would be either a one-man band or a very small team, 2-3 people max. So, which would reflect the commercial viability of that stance. So there's no ways they would be at scale. If you look at people who are, in inverted commas, great artists, and let's talk about this in the music world. I mean, there would be musicians. They've commercialized their music, right? They've have fitted into a genre or started a new genre or led a new genre, but they're commercial. There's distribution, there's marketing, there's album covers, there's YouTube videos. They've commercialized. They might be still brilliant artists. You can look at all the greats, Michael Jackson, Madonna, you know, Elvis Presley, if you want to go really far, far away. These guys were all brilliant, but they commercialized and they understood the game of commercializing. Now, there might be people who are far better musicians out there that are playing in pubs on Saturday nights. They've got better voices, but maybe they haven't wanted to commercialize or pay the price for commercialization. They remain small. So maybe that's an unfair thing to say. Maybe they just never got the chance. But I'm trying to get the point about the fact that you have to have the desire to commercialize.
Okay, so on that point, then what is really going on with these entrepreneurs? What's really happening inside of them?
So I want to reiterate, this is an archetype. And so there is a generalization here. But having been around entrepreneurs for 25 years or more, I am very confident that perhaps not all of the next points that I'm going to make apply, but there will be some, at least 2 to 3 of the list I'm going to give you will apply to a struggling artist. So if that's the case, the idea for you, if you're hearing this in yourself, the idea here is to reflect, just to reflect and say, is this really going on? And how do I change this? So this is a self-reflection tool, effectively. So number one, low self-esteem. Maybe that's true for you, maybe that's not true for you. But in struggling artists, there is a high probability of low self-esteem. And how it manifests, there is a persona of something which is hiding this low self-esteem. My art is magnificent. I might not be, and my art is in inverted commas, the thing I've created. Number two, there's victim mentality going on. Oh, I'm a poor, struggling artist. The world doesn't understand. There's that victim mentality. So the language is very much victim language. And that night with those artists, the language was all victim language. It was all about the other people, how they didn't understand and didn't treat them well and things like that. It was deep victim language.
Victim language. If I'm a victim and I hear you're a victim and you've got victim language, I reject that.
Yeah.
Because there's a certain immaturity around victimhood.
Yeah.
So what's the other way to frame, if you were trying to speak to me? Because you can't say that I'm a victim.
So I would say that this is an internal locus of control or external locus of control, where the power lies. When you're a victim, there is external locus of control. You have no agency in this context.
No influence
No influence.
over
It's all
your
happening to you.
economic future, so to speak.
Yeah, it's all happening to you. You have no power in that, in your world. So everything happens to you. People with high internal locus of control feel that they have a high degree of control over their future. And so the decisions that they make, the actions that they take them to a future that they have designed. Whereas people with external locus of control are waiting to read the environment and then respond to that environment in some way. And generally it's in a victim way that this happened to me.
As we're listening to this, the question for us is, where does the power lie? Outside of us or inside of us? It's an important and powerful consideration.
If I fix your words a little bit, not where does the power lie, where do I perceive the power to lie?
Okay.
Thank
you.
Okay, so because it could technically be outside of you, but still see it as your power to go and get it. Within your power to get the power.
Yeah.
To take the power.
Lovely.
Okay. The third thing is there's comfort in drama. There's normally a lot of drama in those environments. And there's comfort being around drama or in a drama, because it's part of the play of being the struggling artist. Drama is a deflection tool. Everything is happening around me and it protects you because you're in the drama. It's all around you. So there are no equal signs. Yeah, if there's drama around you, it doesn't mean you're a struggling artist. There's just a probability around these things all happening together. Low self-esteem, victim mentality, i.e. external locus of control, and the comfort in the drama. So you're comfortable in the drama. It's not uncomfortable for you to be in that space. Then there's the obvious one, which is fear of selling. There's a deep fear of selling. The language is that it's a sellout, which is quite ironic, but it's a sellout to sell. But there is a deep fear of selling because of the next point, which is there's a deep fear of rejection, which talks to the low self-esteem, right? None of us like rejection, myself included. I don't think I've met anyone who says, oh, I love rejection. But there is a tolerance for rejection in successful entrepreneurs, and there is a deep understanding that rejection is part of the process.
Oh, and rejection is feedback.
Is feedback, exactly. And that rejection is one person's point of view. Or if you've had a bad day, maybe 10 people's point of view. You will hear in the stories of successful entrepreneurs, I was rejected 38 times by people, by venture capitalists when I went out to go raise money. I was rejected by over 100 clients that I went out to sell this product. They didn't understand. They all rejected it. But then I got over it. I went for the 101st time. And then it all started. So there's an understanding in successful entrepreneurs that rejection is part of this journey. Whereas in this environment, the fear of rejection means that if I don't go out and sell, then no one can reject me. If I stay in this, well, they don't understand me, well, then no one can reject me. And so the essence of this is the fear of rejection, which relates to low self-esteem. I can't get up after that rejection. And then the last thing, which is a little obscure, is maybe a low or no desire to build a larger personal repertoire. So what that means is that I'm very comfortable in my small world. Because when you go out, when you are expansive, you bump up against things. When you've got a small repertoire of experience, of views, in other words, narrow-minded, okay, because you don't explore. And maybe another way to say this is that you're not curious. You've got a very strong point of view about one thing, and you're quite rigid in that space. And so anything that doesn't fit that model now is wrong. And you've created your own, inverted commas, model, and everyone else is wrong. So it prevents you from going out and saying, well, why are you rejecting me? To your point earlier about feedback. What is your perspective here? oh, you're too expensive. Why are you saying that?
More questions. Another
Yes.
question.
Why are
Another
you
question.
saying that? Or even asking this artist, why are you commercializing? Why are you selling these smalls at $1,000 each instead of just 3 big pieces at $1 million? The answer might be, I don't know what the answer is because I wasn't there, but the answer might be, well, now people know my name, my art. They know this is whatever the name of the artist is. And so when they can afford it later, it's aspirational. They will buy an original of this artist.
Said in another way, it's just a brand building exercise.
There we are. Exactly.
Mm.
But there isn't even that open-mindedness to go down that route.
So I must admit that as I have been listening to what you've been describing here, Alon, in my mind's eye, I have caught myself only thinking about a struggling artist, only seeing this artist with dirty jeans and paint all over their fingers in front of a canvas, instead of thinking about it as an archetype for entrepreneurship. Just to help me a little bit, please.
Yeah, so many people do because it's called the struggling artist. So if we've anchored ourselves to the fact that it might be an artist, but as I've said before, this applies to all types of entrepreneurs, specifically entrepreneurs who are in the creative space. The creative is broad. So I've seen this, for example, quite recently in a software development business, a 2-person operation, in fact, a husband and wife operation. He built some software. He built that software off open source software, and the world has moved, and he's sitting in this purist space where he believes that there is a space for this type of software that's low cost. The conversation with him is, what is the perception of the market? And his whole thing is, well, he doesn't know about that market, but he believes that this type of software should be broadly available to everyone. And that's very noble. That's wonderful. But who have you told it to? He hasn't gone out to sell it. He's gone on to Facebook and made an advert on Facebook. And then, have you had any inquiries from Facebook? Yes, I've had 1 or 2 inquiries. Have you sold to anyone? No. Why are you not selling? Have you gone on a sales course? You would never do that. This is not commercial. So the perception, well, what's your pricing like? Pricing is excellent. We are 1/10 of the price of our nearest competitor. So the perception is, well, then I should be doing 10 times more volume than that competitor. But I've said, but maybe the perception is that this is cheap and this is in open source, and it's maybe even too expensive if it's built off open source software, because you're openly saying this is built on such and such platform. So there's no commercial relationship with that software. To his credit, they put something on Facebook to go and try and sell, but they haven't sold. And now they're battling. So the initial sales were through just their friends and family originally, and then the odd lucky sale here and there. But there is no ways that this will grow, and it's not sustaining them. So the wife has got a full-time job and only working at night on the weekends, and she's keeping them both alive. And he's there every day, struggling along in his inverted commas studio and typing away, and then getting quite bitter about the fact that the market is not buying his software. So that's not an artist per se painting a picture. This is a coder. This is somebody who's building software.
Oh, lovely. So as we wind down this conversation, let's just talk then a little bit about how to shift a person that finds themselves in this mindset.
So when I work with entrepreneurs, or even the guides at Raise Corp work with entrepreneurs who manifest as a struggling artist, the archetype of a struggling artist, the first thing to understand is if there is a desire to shift, because often within the struggling artist, there isn't a desire to shift. There's a deep pain. In other words, I'm struggling. I'm not making ends meet, but there is some stubbornness around shifting. So you first have to work out if that person wants to shift. Okay, so if they do, the first thing that I would work on is, in a very soft and subtle way, try and talk about the internal and external locus of control. In other words, their victimhood. I might not couch it as victimhood. I might couch it as external locus of control. But we would talk about where's the power and try for them to understand how they see their power in the world.
I think, if I can correct your language, where's the perception of power?
Aha. Yeah, you must have heard that from somebody. Yes, where's their perception of power? Exactly. Where's their perception of power? Then the next place I would take them to is to try and model that. So in other words, find successful role models within their environment and unpack that journey to success. So often I would say to somebody, even as recent as this week, I did some training with entrepreneurs, and they were talking about the fact that they were a small organization, but you don't understand. They were saying, but you don't understand. And I said, well, are there any people in your particular industry that are 10 times your size? And they said, yes, there are. I said, who are those organizations? And they named one or two. And I said, are there any people in your industry that are 100 times your size? And they said, yes. And I said, well, can you name them? And they named one or two international players in their market. So I said, well, that is proof that there is a market and B, an ability to scale in that environment. And the way that they've lensed their world to scale to that point must be different to the way that you've lensed your world, because you're telling me, but you don't understand. Yet there are multiple examples out there of people who have built something in exactly the same market as you with similar products. So it cannot be about me understanding, it's about you understanding. What are your perceptions and how are you framing your world that is making it difficult for you to grow this business? So that's the second thing, is I reflect against role models within their industry that have become successful. And so, well, how do you think they did that? And then the next point is just to ask them to move one step and not to make multiple steps. Let's just do one thing towards that. Let's go on a sales course. Would you agree to go on a sales course? I would. Which one? I don't know. Let's go and research that now. Okay, you do that. Okay, I want to go on this one. I'm sitting here. Just book it. Okay. I'll sit there and watch them book it online. And then when they book it, I say, okay, I'm going to call you afterwards. So it's just that one step to move them, because often the perception of the next step is so big, they just need to be pushed to the next step.
Well, they've also lived in that reality for so long that there's no momentum. There's nothing that pushes them forward. And so they really need you to help them.
Yeah, but the point is one little step. And then what happens is there's generally, and I'm being realistic here, there's generally success in that next step, whatever it might be, whether it's a sales call or let's change your website, or let's call somebody together and then talk about how they rejected you or not. And sometimes I've been in situations where we've called and they say, yes, come see me. And then I just look at them and go, well, was that so difficult? And other times when there is a rejection, I say, well, okay, let's just try and understand why. How could you have done that better? So let's try again. And then comfort them that this is normal. And then it comes down to that point of self-esteem, because if there is success, then it builds your self-esteem just a little bit and your confidence just a little bit. And then you push a little bit more, and that reinforces a positive path. And so you go to the next piece of confidence, and so it builds like a snowball.
Well, it's also addressing the other part, which is suddenly the locus of control comes closer toward me.
Yes.
The perception of it.
Exactly.
Actually, I've got this.
Yeah.
What it just simply does is shifts the mind. A vista that wasn't available before suddenly begins to open up. There's a glimmer of light somewhere on the horizon that they may not have seen.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, if you have been listening to this and either you have said to yourself, this is me. Thank you, Alon, for helping me to figure out a way through it. Or perhaps you were listening to this and saying, this is my aunt, my gran, my mother, my sister, my brother, my son. And also, if you have been listening to this and saying, that's not me, well, there's 8 other archetypes to come. And next episode, we're going to be talking about the big deal hunter. This has been a Razor's Edge podcast. My name is Gareth Armstrong, and we'll see you in the next one.